Welcome everyone. This is the Yale SOM admissions webinar for media and entertainment industry. And we are joined today by four great current students who are going to talk a little bit about their experiences here at Yale SOM and how you might be considering joining us and strategizing around how you might find yourself in that space. My name is Mike Minnitoli, and I'm a member of the Career Development Office here at SOM, and I'm specifically part of a team of coaches that work with students to help support them through their job search and their career search while here in the school. And the CDO as a whole is just about 22 members, and we have 8 coaches, as I mentioned, and then another set of folks who have experience working externally with some of the partners and employers that are interested in hiring our students. In the media entertainment space. You know, the media entertainment space is a very broad space where students can find themselves in a lot of different functions. Maybe it's finance, maybe it's marketing, it might be a lot of different areas. So some of our students here today will share about how they found the roles that they were looking for and why they chose to pursue that passion. And also, I think location geographically obviously opens itself up. While we see a lot of students obviously head to the West Coast of the United States in Los Angeles, San Francisco, we also see just as many navigating themselves to New York. And again, our student panel here will share with you how they chose to think about where they wanted to be post-graduation. So we're glad you're here. We are going to go around and I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. And I'm going to go in the order of my screen. So if our panelists wouldn't mind giving us a little background on where they're from, where they studied prior to SOM, and what their role was immediately before SOM. And I'm going to go in order of my screen and ask Nick to start us off.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Hosta. I'm a second year here at Yale SOM and one of the leaders of the Media and Entertainment Club. I did my undergraduate at the University of Southern California, focusing on music industry. And prior to SOM, I worked as an artist manager in the music industry. And right before, I headed up the marketing department at 800 Pound Gorilla Media, an entertainment media company.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. Wesley?
Yeah, I'm Wesley, second year MBA student. Before SOM, I did my undergraduate studying business at UC Berkeley. After that, I went to Charles River Associates, which is an economic consulting firm, for 4 years. And then I went to Yale SOM. This past summer, I worked at Comcast, focusing on their broadband internet division, which is Xfinity, but I did do some media and entertainment related projects with NBC Universal.
Great, thank you. Grishan?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. My name is Grishan, second year MBA here at Yale SOM. I graduated from the University of Maryland, Finance and Information Systems, and I taught for 2 years, Teach for America, and through that I did a master's in education at Penn. Most recently, before SOM, I was at Deloitte in the federal healthcare practice in strategy and operations. And over the summer, I was in strategy at Riot Games.
Thank you. And then finally, Ikia.
Hi, thanks, Mike. My name's Ikia. I also graduated from Berkeley with Wesley. Go Bears. After Berkeley, I went to the Federal Reserve for a little bit, working in regulation and compliance, and I ended up going to a financial technology startup in San Francisco, focusing on financial inclusion. And last summer, I interned at Paramount in marketing strategy.
So as you can see, if you're part of our audience today, lots of different varying backgrounds of students of how they came to SOM and ultimately found themselves into a big space of media entertainment. So we'll dive into that. I have a couple questions here that I'm going to start our students off with to continue now that we know who they are and what their backgrounds are. If you have questions, you can use the Q&A box within the webinar. And we have some folks behind the scenes who are organizing those questions, and we'll do our best to answer all the questions that do come in. But I do encourage you, the more questions you ask, the less you have to hear me talk, which is a bonus in your area, and you get to hear from these great students. So I'm going to start. We're going to go in the reverse order this time around. Maybe we can start with, why did you choose to attend Yale SOM for business school? And Ikia, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So I think the biggest factor for me going into business school was having the ability to take classes outside of business school, which is a little counterintuitive, but I felt that. So I went to Berkeley and I did business administration and economics as my double major. A lot of my classes were focused on what I assumed I would also be taking in my MBA, but I really wanted the opportunity to be able to connect MBA classes to other areas, especially because I knew I wanted to go into media and entertainment. And for me, Yale SOM focuses so much on trying to connect with the larger Yale community, and that was really big. And then when I ended up coming to Welcome Weekend, what really, really convinced me was everyone that I had met was so interdisciplinary. Truly, like, I feel like I've met the most interesting people with the most interesting backgrounds before coming to SOM, or people who want to go into interesting spaces after SOM while I've been here. So that was very evident in even like the first 2 days that I spent on campus.
Perfect. Gershon?
Yeah, I think it's to echo a lot of what Akia just said. I was really interested in how business interacts with other disciplines, and I wanted to go to school in which you weren't siloed in just the business school or just the law school or just the engineering program. And I've been able to interact with students from all of those schools, and next semester actually planning on taking a class or two outside of SOM, and then even within SOM. There are students from other schools in some of my classes, and that always adds a unique lens to class discussions.
Perfect. Wesley?
Yeah, for me, definitely, I echo a lot of the comments that Ruben said. I would say the integrated curriculum at Yale definitely attracted me. I found a lot of my classes, even if it's a finance class, intro to finance class, it still incorporates perspectives from the other functional areas as well in our assignments. The other aspect is that I come from an antitrust background where I was explaining to regulators how a merger will benefit consumers. So that perspective, multi-stakeholder perspective, was definitely something I want to learn in my analysis of and business. And I definitely think that that type of perspective is incorporated into a lot of our core curriculum here at SOM.
Excellent. Thank you. And finally, Nick.
I think a lot of the points why I chose SO have been touched on, but one I'll add is when I was looking at going somewhere to get my MBA, I wanted an experience that's a little bit different than my undergrad. Going to school in Los Angeles, it's a major city and you're right in the middle of the school. And one thing I really loved about Yale SOM is it's such a tight-knit community where everybody like knows each other. Like walking through Evans Hall, I see so many people that I know on a daily basis. You stop and you get that connection that I think goes beyond just business school, which is something I was really looking for.
Excellent. So a couple of you in talking about your opportunity talked about the interdisciplinary nature and the opportunity to take classes in a lot of other schools here at Yale. I'm curious if anybody had, and you can just kind of throw them out, any specific classes that you feel have helped you prepare for the media entertainment space and maybe what school they fall under. And Nike, you were shaking your head the most, so I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so we're allowed to take one elective during our first year, and mine was French New Wave cinema. I did my final paper on French exports into the industry, and I talked about it a lot in my interviews and even during work. So that, and that was in the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, and now I'm taking two non-SOM classes, and one's in the drama school. It's a management seminar.
Great. Anyone else want to jump in on this one? Classes they've thought about or already taken?
So this isn't outside of SOM. Sorry, Mike, did you want specifically outside of SOM course?
That's okay. Any class is good.
So there's a class taught by our former dean, Dean Snyder, called Economic Analysis of High-Tech Industries. And it, as the name suggests, we look at high-tech industries. And one of them is the streaming space, which includes gaming, but also like traditional streaming. And it's been a super relevant class talking about the current events in the space with, antitrust pressure or, foreign investment in gaming specifically. So I think that's been a really good like macro class to learn about the industry, even if it doesn't actually touch on the function of what I would be doing day to day, just knowing what's going on in the greater industry. I think between the professor's experience and the guest speakers he brings in, it's been super helpful.
Wesley, Nick, anything to add?
Yeah, I just have one quick thing to add to Gershon's comment. I'm also taking the same class, and I really do like the guest speakers that Ted Snyder brings in. He has an amazing network. I remember one of them, he brought in the former CEO of Time Warner, who gave us an insider perspective of what he thought about streaming and in the overall media entertainment space. So it's nice to see how a lot of the academic theories that Ted Snyder has taught is applied in the real world and what insiders would think about that.
Excellent. Then I think that's great. And, there's always opportunities. And I think, as we said, sometimes you come across classmates who are doing a dual in the theater department. And there's a lot of exposure there to be able to think about the media entertainment space, and obviously a lot of good classes. So if any others come to mind, certainly feel free to share how even the core curriculum has helped prepare you for the space that you're hoping to move into. Shifting a little bit to the idea of how you pursued your summer internship last year and maybe a full-time role this year, curious if anybody would be able to share some of the resources that they've taken advantage of at SOM to get to this point. And I think maybe we'll start with Gershon this time.
Yeah, so for me, so like I said, I was at Riot Games over the summer. Riot actually has quite a few SOM alumni at the company, and it's growing. They just hired another person full-time from last year's graduating class. And I think that's what really helped me kind of determine that, okay, this is a place that I want to go to. I didn't necessarily think I would end up in gaming or media and entertainment when I came to business school, but through those conversations with the alumni who had similar backgrounds that I did, they kind of answered all my questions about the space and kind of helped me come to the realization that that would be a cool opportunity to pursue and a great place to spend the summer. So in short, for me, it was the Alumni Network that was pretty well represented at the firm.
Great. Nick, can I call on you to answer some of the resources that you used in your search?
Sure. So I think for me, it was really about coming to business school to reposition myself in the industry. As before, I'd worked with talent as an artist manager, and I was really trying to go into this niche area of media and entertainment investing, specifically sort of functioning in a venture capital area in that specific area. And so utilizing the CDO for, working on my story, resume reviews, cover letters, and learning how to go out to my network, which I already had established, talk to them and get them to view me as Nick, the potential investment candidate, no longer the artist manager that they've known for years, and really working to reposition myself effectively.
Okay. Wesley, anything to add? Any resources you took advantage of?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to the consulting club. So I did my summer in strategy and Comcast, even though it is not a consulting firm. During the strategy interview, they still did like a sort of a case interview. And that's pretty common among internal strategy roles for different industries. And the consulting club did a really good job of having a curriculum teaching you how to go through a case interview and also putting you into groups so you can practice with each other and get a lot of really helpful feedback.
And again, anything you want to add?
Yeah, if Leslie's giving a shout out to a club, I will also shout out Media and Entertainment, which Nick and I are both leaders of. I will say that I would not have gotten my job if it weren't for the Paramount case competition, which Media and Entertainment took a lot of actual direction in leading the whole schools to kind of put in teams and stuff like that. So I'm so glad we were able to participate in that. Obviously, the Alumni Network too. I think a lot of individual reaching out to alums and getting the CDO help in sort of navigating those conversations was really helpful.
Great. So taking a step back for a moment and thinking about one of the questions, there's a lot of great questions coming in. The one that I'd like to start with, just to frame, so a student or a participant has asked, how did you decide that the media and entertainment space was a space that you had hoped to pursue? And then kind of point B, why did you feel business school was needed as the potential go-between to get you there? And I'm going to open this up to anybody that wants to start on an answer here. Anyone? There you go.
Okay, sorry, I can start. So I actually, I was a freelance, I am a freelance culture journalist before business school and now. So a lot of my work was on the actual writing side. I was really involved in my college newspaper in undergrad. So when I was thinking about business school, it was really about like, my favorite publications were going out of business. My favorite writers are getting fired because of the sort of antiquated profit models that newspapers and magazines really sit on top of. So that was really my direction heading into business school. And then I think I was flexible enough to understand, like I had a lot of conversations with alums and just MBAs in media and entertainment, which is a small pool to begin with. And everyone is so, so helpful, even if they didn't go to SOM, even if they didn't go to Yale. So kind of getting the direction to push me towards like the streaming film and TV space kind of led me into like looking at Paramount further and move away from more of the traditional media space. So that was really my sort of arc into media and entertainment. But I came in wanting to specifically do media and entertainment with my MBA because of how few MBAs there were in the space and why I thought it would be beneficial to kind of understand the traditional sort of business problems and how they fit into the media and entertainment space.
I think for me, it was, after about 5 or so years in consulting, I wanted to pivot to a new industry, the tech industry. So I will give a shout out as well to the Tech Club because I heavily leaned on the Tech Club and Tech Club's preparation for tech interviews. Coming into SOM, I just knew that I wanted to move into tech. My entire career before this has basically been B2B. I mean, that's what consulting is, right? You're consulting for other businesses or government entities. And I wanted to move more into the consumer space. I wanted to work for a company that made a product that I could get excited about. I'd never really considered gaming until, the alum who ended up being my hiring manager and then my boss over the summer reached out to the Tech Club saying, hey, I'm hiring interns over the summer. Had a conversation with him and I found that, his backstory was very similar to mine in that he did consulting in a totally unrelated industry, but was still able to apply that same skill set to something that he was passionate about. And so I kind of used that as like a talking point in my stories that I have this background in consulting and I know how to do this function well. I just want to do it for an industry that I'm more passionate about. And I guess they bought it because here I am.
Great. Nick, Wesley, anything you would want to add?
Sure. I mean, for me, it's I knew I wanted to work in music since I was 5 or 6. I've always been music obsessed, like listening to the Beatles with my parents and then playing in successful bands before I went to college. I always knew I wanted to find my place in the music industry. And after school, I sort of found myself working with talent a lot. And I sort of realized after a few years of that although the work was rewarding and, you see things you worked on all over the world, it wasn't a long-term solution for me. So going to business school was really about trying to pivot and find where my place was in the industry in a more, I don't know if professional is the right word, but in sort of a different sort of stance. And that was part of the reason I chose Yale SOM was to help sort of pivot my role.
Great. All right. So I think that answers our question about why we got here. Now let's think about how. And one of the questions that came through was asking some of you to share the timelines of kind of what you saw last year as you pursued your summer internship, and maybe even what you might have in mind this year if you're still looking for something different. So Wesley, maybe we'll start with you. I know you did something a little bit different, and maybe you can share a little bit about your timeline and how you ended up with Comcast.
Yeah, for Comcast. So I remember in they posted their job listing for my internship, probably sometime in December of my first year. I interviewed for it January, February, got the offer in mid-February, and then started my internship in the summer. In terms of I will say that was after sort of went along with consulting timeline for internship recruiting. For consulting, they also interviewed in January. So I saw because I was doing strategy at Comcast, I was sort of interviewing for kind of similar roles as I was doing consulting interviewing at the same time.
Great. Gershon, any timeline aspects that you came across?
It was actually pretty similar to Wesley in that I applied around December-ish, around towards the end of the year. And then after, folks came back from their New Year's vacations and stuff, I started getting calls back. Ultimately got my offer in mid-February. But that I think was, as far as my peers went, recruiting in tech was on the early side because once I got my offer, I did tell other companies no. So like there were other interviews continuing, and I know folks were still interviewing through the spring. I do know just because I helped with recruiting for Riot this year that they've started earlier. I think they've even given out some offers already for next summer. So it is kind of all over the place in smaller companies like game studios. But I wouldn't say that is necessarily like the strict timeline that I followed is necessarily the norm because it could be early, it could be late.
Gotcha. Like, yeah, anything from your timeline that you would want to share?
Yeah, I felt like a lot of my timeline was very proactive fate or proactive luck. I was talking to a lot of people in more of the written media space. And then I started talking to some alums. So Karen Hermelin is an alum of SOM. She is an executive vice president at Paramount. I happened to talk to her the day that the application for Paramount was due, and she was the one who told me to apply. So I applied that day. And then the Paramount case competition came early spring. So when we did that, we were prepping, we talked to a lot of people during the competition. And then I had gotten a call for just a kind of informational interview. I didn't realize if it was an informational interview. So I was just like, oh, I don't think I'm that interested in this specific role. And then after the case competition, 2 weeks after, I honestly just called the recruiter back and said, like, I know all of this information from the case competition. I know I can be useful. Like, is there any role? And I got my interview the next day. So I actually got my job the first day of spring break. I think that's late March. And that was actually on the early side for other film studios because I started getting interviews again, like early April or like mid-April. So it's definitely at the end of most of everyone's timeline at SOM, but it's worthwhile.
Good stuff. And Nick, anything you would add?
Sure. So I'll add in real quick. I don't think I said what I did over the summer. I worked at a RS management firm called Activist RS Management, their corporate advisory function, overseeing high net worth individuals' investments in entertainment. And for timeline, I did do some more traditional recruiting stuff in the fall and winter. I was looking into entertainment technology companies and getting some offers there and realizing it wasn't exactly what I wanted. And from there, around February and March, I started reaching out to my network and making calls to partners of firms and people that I hoped would remember me. And one of those eventually sort of struck. And by March, I was having conversations about coming to join the team for the summer.
Very good. So a lot of you talked about, applications in December, opportunities kind of coming to fruition in the spring, February, March timeframe, and a little bit later. Can you talk a little bit about what you were doing toward your career search in the earlier fall, so like September, October, November, to potentially prepare for these types of things? And then B, I'm going to pull a question here. We're talking a lot about career here, but it also doesn't hurt to kind of throw in, there are other things involved in business school, right? Sometimes we go to class, we try to maintain a social life as best we can. How did you so what were you doing in the fall? And then how were you managing kind of everything from recruiting to social life to academics? Maybe I'll start with Wesley this time.
Yeah, so the question was, in my first year, how did I manage the process?
Yeah, just how did you manage your time, and how did you approach the fall in terms of were you doing coffee chats? Were you thinking about where you wanted to be? Were you applying? What did your earlier fall look like?
Yeah, when I first got to SOM my first year, I had hypotheses of what I wanted to do as a career. Those were that I want to be in consulting, that I want to work in an internal strategy role. So in order to test those hypotheses, I had coffee chats. And in my coursework, I thought about whether it's relevant, if I could apply to my different career pathways. And I did a lot of reflection on, was I interested in being a consultant and doing strategy? One of the things that helped me was doing the sort of the technical case interviews. It's a preview of what it's like to be a consultant. So by doing all these little activities, I got a better sense of would I see myself in this role in the future. And that's how I chose like my activities in my first year.
Great. Ikea, anything you would add? How you balanced all the different pieces of life at SOM and kind of what you were doing in the fall toward recruiting?
Yeah, I will say that, so Media and Entertainment Club, a lot of people told us very early on that our recruiting would mostly happen in the spring. So my goal in the fall was really to, like, from October on, try to do like 2 coffee chats per week. Just I thought that was kind of low stakes. I was able to reach out to people from my network and outside of my network and just like really have casual conversations about, like, to Wesley's point, testing my hypotheses. Like, is this what I want to do? Does this make sense? Do I think like, what do job titles actually mean versus what do people do? And that question I found was really important. And then in spring, more of the applications started coming out and I just kind of just started applying.
Nick, anything you would add?
I think sort of echoing what Ikea said, it was a lot of, I was trying to cast a wide net and sort of figure out what sort of opportunities there were for MBAs in the M&E space, including internships for the summer. So talking to alumni at Riot Games or Spotify or anything like that, and just try to figure out what sort of roles I might be interested in and what was really out there. The Yale SOM network was really helpful at it.
Great. So I think that's a good transition. I think a lot of folks have mentioned the Alumni Network, and I'm curious how some of you engaged with not only the Yale SOM network, but also maybe the Yale University-wide network, if you were able to tap into that. Would love to hear any examples that you might have of how you identified who some of these alums were, and potentially, how did you form a relationship with them, and hopefully moving forward, whether that was to learn about the space and the different roles or types of opportunities that existed, or potentially, directly toward the opportunity that you got. And Ikea, you shared a great example of an alum who helped you with Paramount. Maybe Gershon, if I could start with you. You've also mentioned a couple of alums, so maybe share how you went about that.
So like I said, the alum who I ended up working for over the summer, he directly reached out to the tech clubs and said, hey, I'm hiring interns, and really tried to encourage SOM folks to apply. So I just, grabbed time on his calendar to talk to him before I applied, just to get a better idea of the role. And he also connected me to the other SOM alum at Riot. Beyond that, I guess, Yale alum outside of SOM, I think the tech club, and I keep coming back to the tech club because that's the professional club I have the most experience with. The tech club did a good job at speakers at big tech firms that, maybe went to Yale College or, computer science at Yale or something. And so, through that, I was just able to kind of explore the different areas of tech that would be adjacent to the area I would be working in as an MBA. And then once I landed at Riot over the summer, then I did have a chance to chat up some of the Yale College folks who are more in like the data or like the engineering side of things of Riot. But I would say for the purposes of actually landing the internship, for me, and of course this could vary for different people, but for me it was primarily SOM specific alumni.
Great. Anybody else have any alumni shares, how they tapped into the greater alumni community? I will say there's a lot of alumni involvement, especially on the West Coast each year, with a lot of alumni panels that get together. So great opportunity during some of the breaks to potentially take advantage of those when they're happening. There's been a couple of questions that have come in from students about sort of specific subsects of what would fall under media entertainment, from streaming to sports to gaming, and a couple others. Curious if anybody has any thoughts on, did they explore any of those areas? How deeply did they explore? Any alums that you've come across? I know I have hosted a media entertainment panel for incoming students once a year, and a lot of those folks are working in the streaming space and engaging there at Viacom, at Warner Music. And I think that I know that we have an alum who is working for the brand new NHL team at the Seattle Kraken. So that we have alums that are spread out. I'm curious just Did anyone here explore some of those spaces outside of maybe what you did? And how did you go about that, or who did you find?
I can jump in with that. I actually explored gaming pretty thoroughly in the fall and winter, sort of looking at Riot Games, Epic Games, and reaching out and talking to any alumni or any sort of people that I could that had any sort of MBA program. I felt it really helped me decide what I wanted to do, because it started making me realize like how many people in my existing network connect to the space as well. And then a company I was interviewing with for a more traditional MBA internship in gaming, the company I ended up working with actually ended up being a lead investor in a private sort of funding round. And that sort of connection made me realize that there was some overlap and figure out what I wanted to do.
Great. Anyone explore sports at all? I'm just kind of curious if there was any look into that. And
Do esports count? Because Riot is big in esports.
yeah, of course. I mean, I think in today's day and age, I mean, we're seeing more and more universities creating those types of teams within. So
The US
I think
Army has an esports team, so that's how you know it's legit.
Sure. So anything, did you look into that at all outside of Riot Games?
I think my role at Riot was more tech focused, more focused on the games rather than the events like esports. Also just a function of being in a pandemic, it's hard to have big events. But I do know that esports is kind of what Riot is really historically generated a large share of its revenue from, and it continues to grow because you don't pay to play Riot Games. So it's an area of interest of mine. Once I land at Riot next summer when I go back, it's an area that I would want to explore, but I didn't necessarily explore it last summer.
Anyone else? Anybody explore anything? Go ahead, Aki.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I did a little bit look into sports media and sports news, and that was we have one person from NBA. We also have like a larger, to your point about the larger Yale network. Honestly, like people are just so psyched when you're associated with Yale at all that I found it really, really easy to reach out to truly anybody in the larger Yale community, or even just anybody in general, and be like, I am at Yale right now and I'm looking into entertainment, which is just a mix that doesn't necessarily always happen. And then in the news space too, like I was really looking into local news and broadcast news and magazines, and we have a few alums doing that, but also the larger Yale network is really big on that. There's a whole journalism initiative on campus with a lot of journalist alums. There's also Yale in Hollywood, which is a huge alumni group on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram that is really, really well connected. And they do things like, even if you're in LA for like 3 days, they'll host you.
Great. So want to switch gears a little bit here and talk a little, well, actually, before I do that, I was going to say, since we're in the theme of sports, if you don't know, this weekend is the Harvard-Yale football game, which is probably, in terms of sports on our campus, one of the bigger events of the school year, outside of maybe the SOM hockey games. But big event, a lot of things happening around campus around the game, people excited, lots of friends coming to town. So it's actually a big week, and there's a lot of activities amongst the students this week to kind of get prepared for what is known as the big game around here. So very exciting sports weekend in town, but did want to switch gears just a little bit. I'm curious, some of you have mentioned Dean Snyder's class in terms of specific classes. I'm curious about any faculty members who are, who you've either taken or maybe are thinking about targeting, who are help providing kind of a different insight into, maybe they're not specifically teaching in the media entertainment space, but they've kind of helped you frame how to get there. Maybe it's a negotiations class, maybe it is that finance class or an accounting class. But just curious if there's anyone you're targeting, maybe it's even for a future elective here as you finish up your time with us. And I'll open that up to anybody that wants to throw out a name or an instance.
I'm a really big fan of our competitor core class. It's taught by Joy Deb and Judy Chevalier. And just the way we talk about how companies have so many different things that they're thinking about when they're making any sort of play. It was really important to me even this summer, looking at Paramount is within this larger Viacom CBS bubble, and just the sort of different directions they make leadership wise or streaming wise, or even opening up the film slate during like the tail end of the pandemic wise. Everything is so based on game theory and competitor, more of a competitor lens to it. So I really loved that class, and I'm taking Joy Deb's game theory class in spring 2.
Another professor that I unfortunately was not able to take his class in the fall, but I have heard him speak in kind of other contexts, is Kyle Jensen. And he does a lot of tech focused classes. The main class that he teaches in the fall is management of software development. So basically, how do you work at a tech firm in a business capacity, but still build that tech fluency to gain rapport with engineers? I think it's super helpful, especially if you're going into more technical side of media entertainment like gaming, in which the product is a tech product. I think Kyle Jensen's classes are pretty top notch for that.
An elective I'm thinking of taking is one from Fiona Scott-Morton. She's one of the leading experts in antitrust. Antitrust is a major force affecting the media entertainment space, especially with companies that are so large and looking to acquire each other. So that's definitely one class I'm looking for next semester.
And just jumping in, something that's pretty unique to SOM I found is the opportunity to do independent study projects. So in lieu of taking an elective, you get a professor to sponsor you and you sort of create this project. I worked with Professor Will Goatsman in the finance department, and my project was on NFTs in the creative industries. So determining if there was an actual value add, and then how larger corporations could incorporate a strategy to be profitable to them. And I highly recommend anyone taking advantage of something like that with the one-on-one experience with the professor.
I guess that's a good segue there. There's a participant had asked, like, how accessible are faculty? Do you feel that you can go for office hours? Can you stop them in the cafe? I guess I'm curious as to your, has anyone built a relationship with a faculty member? It sounds like Nick, I would imagine if you got to an independent study, probably a place where you started. Could you maybe share on how you developed that independent study and the kind of how you reached out to that faculty member?
Absolutely. So it sort of came about. I knew that I wanted to do an independent study around NFTs, around crypto in the entertainment space. And then Professor Goatsman came in as a guest lecturer for one of our lectures in the executive core curriculum and touched on NFTs in the art space. And we got to talking after class, and there was some mutual interest there. And in terms of accessibility, I mean, I have a great rapport with him. I mean, we had to check in about weekly, at least on the project, to provide updates. And I feel that walking through SOM, there are times where professor will stop and talk to me just to say hi, which I think is pretty unique and great.
Excellent. Any other stories of kind of creating a relationship with a faculty member that anybody would share? Okay. Sometimes I look at this as a softball question, but it sometimes is more difficult to answer. But I'm curious if someone could. And the question here is, what is the typical day in the life of an MBA student at SOM? Yeah, but maybe we'll just leave it at that. But like, could you talk about it? Could anybody talk about a typical day that they experience while at the school?
Sure. I think what varies is, like, everyone's class timings, but I think what is pretty typical for me, regardless of what my schedule is any given day, is the fact that everyone has the same period of time for lunch as a break. So there's no classes going on. And so that's basically when I see everyone, we all gather in the courtyard or the cafeteria. No one has class, and that's just when we catch up with each other. Other than that, I'm usually more of a come to class for class and leave person, because there's just so much else on campus for me to explore. There's like so many campus libraries and stuff. So I like to do all my independent studying in those areas just to make sure I see all the sites before I leave in less than 6 months now.
Anybody else want to share what their typical day sort of looks like?
There's just so many things happening all the time. It's really hard to tell what a typical day is, but I guess for me, I always have class in the morning, and then lunch, there's either a talk happening or something in the courtyard, or people are just gathering in either Charlie's place, which is our cafeteria, or the food trucks outside of school. And people, like Gershon said, people really like end up congregating during that time, and then we have more class, or if you have any other activities, you do that. You have club meetings after school. A lot of second years are doing additional internships for fun or for career things, and that's usually taking up time. And then on Mondays, we have voices after school at 6 p.m. and you hear what your classmates, how your classmates got here and what their lives have been like, or you have wine class, or you have like the multitude of different, we have jazz night coming up in the courtyard this week. There's just a million things going on that you can do at any given moment.
Great. Nick, Wesley, anything you would add? I would say from my standpoint, the great thing, I guess, that has come during this pandemic time is the opportunity to take advantage of the courtyard, which is sort of behind me here in my picture. Far more students taking advantage of a lot of tables out there, having lunch together, as everybody has said, and it's actually an opportunity. Whereas, I'm somewhat limited to seeing people either by appointment or walking around the building. That opportunity to kind of gather on the courtyard outside, and whether it's students playing games or us hosting a table for folks to walk by. I think that's been, if there was something that kind of came out of this masked pandemic world we're in at the moment, it is that opportunity to kind of find your way out there during that lunchtime or during other breaks to connect with your classmates. And we've seen the giant chess, the giant tic-tac-toe, and a lot of other games. And I think there's been concerts out there and students showing off their own personal skills that, so whether it was singing, acting, dancing. So it was a great opportunity that all kind of falls under where we're talking today. I do have to get to our last question as we're running out of time here. So I will ask everyone to answer this one. And the question is, what advice do you have for candidates preparing to apply to Yale SOM? And what do you wish you would have known when you personally were applying that maybe you know now? And if Nick would start, that would be fantastic.
Sure. I think something I found really helpful was to talk to current students and sort of get an idea for what their day was like, sort of thing to offer to them. I know when I talked to current students, I learned about the Media and Entertainment Club, and from there sort of reached out to those club leaders and got an idea for how that looks. Something I wish I had known, it gets colder here than I thought, if I'm being honest.
Okay, thank you. Definitely cold today. Wesley, can we go to you?
Yeah, so I guess like one thing I wish I knew is how much that's going on in MBA and business school. It really is like drinking out of a fire hose. There's just so much going on. There's just no way you can fit everything within a day. So my advice for that would be just to, I guess that you don't need to know exactly what you want to do after an MBA, but as I've mentioned before, have certain hypotheses of what you want to have as a career, and then orient your activities towards testing. Do you like that career or not? And I think through that process, you'll be able to sort of determine which activities is going to be most relevant to you.
Great. Krishan, can we go to you?
Yeah, so something that I feel like everyone should do that I did as I was applying was, like Nick said, talk to students and get a feel of the campus culture. That really informed, where I ultimately ended up applying. I did not necessarily just like say I'm applying to all the peer schools of this one school. I was very explicit and deliberate in the schools I was applying to because of the experiences I had with students that I interacted with. Something I wish I knew coming in, I guess once you get here, it's okay to say no to things. You don't have to sign up for everything. I'm currently in the middle of some self-reflection where I'm like, I should have said no to that big thing that I have to plan in 2 weeks. So yeah, definitely like, and I think that goes back to the first point, be deliberate, don't just sign up for everything. Don't just apply everywhere, figure out, what it involves, what it entails. And if it's for you, go for it.
Great. And finally, thank you.
I think you really can tell the personality of the school as you get to know more people who go to who are currently at SOM or who are alums, or honestly, like a lot of the students who are on this call now will have the opportunity to actually visit the school that a lot of students hadn't had in the past couple of years. Again, welcome weekend was so indicative for me. You can read as much as you want about a school, but the personality really shows when you're actually here and you know what people you just really vibe with. And that was really big for me. And then one thing that I think is always important, to Sean's point about being deliberate, I think like targeting now, or like putting together a list of like what job titles seem just really cool to you and what do you actually want to learn more about. You don't have to learn about it before your MBA, just like put together a list of what people do that inspires you or you think you want to do, and just like collect that. And then when you're in your MBA period, that's when you can explore. But like doing that data collection before is a great opportunity to like use your time well during the MBA.
Great. Well, we are at time. I'm going to wrap up by saying first, thank you very much to our students today who are giving the oh so valuable lunchtime period by being here to speak with you today and share their experiences on why this is a great place and what they're doing here. So thank you. B, thank you to our audience. There's some great questions here that we just didn't have time to get to. Please consider following up with admissions. There's a number of student ambassadors that work in the admissions office that you can connect to who can help you answer these or point you in the direction of a classmate who can certainly help answer those questions for you. But continue to explore this great place that is sort of behind me. Thank you for your time today, and we look forward to seeing everyone soon. Take care.